Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem.
This is Sheviis, chapter 9, Halacha 4, and if you're following along in the art scroll, we're on 74b2. Argument, very classic sugya that you're going to also find in Sachim in Bavli 52a. It's going to also be in the Bavli, in the Yerushalmi, and it's going to be here in Sheviis. It's very relevant to Sheviis. So this came up before, but we're going to get into with more detail. And part of why this is now the second time this is coming up, you have to look at the differences between what we already did and what is going to be here in the Mishnah. Part of the art of learning Gemara, when you read the Chazan Ish book, is to try to look at the Mishnahs and the different points of view when something looks like it could be contradictory. So we have this four-way dispute on the Beur deadline. And Beur, of course, is going to be where the object is no longer in the field, and it's not a protected field, as we were just covering. And now the Sheviis vegetables have to be put out. But now we have something where we have some vegetables that are put into a barrel and pickled, or to a jar and pickled, different kinds of vegetables. For instance, you might have some garlic, you might have some cucumbers, you might have some fennel. And that actually is a pickle that I make at my house. I do about 2.5 or 3% salt solution to water, and then I put them in. And when you taste the pickles, you will taste the fennel in the cucumber. And when you taste the garlic, you'll taste the cucumber in the garlic, and the fennel in the garlic. And the flavor of the garlic and the cucumber goes into the fennel. So what is going to be the status of this with Beur now? So the Mishnah says, if someone preserves 3 pickled vegetables of different types in a single barrel or jar, Rabbi Lazar says we eat all the vegetables in the barrel only on account of the first, meaning the first to disappear of the field. And basically, once any of the 3 species is going to be gone from the field, all of the vegetables in the barrel are going to be subject to Beur. What is Rabbi Eliezer saying? Rabbi Eliezer is saying, in the case of my pickles, well, Adam, very nice that you have the fennel, and very nice that you have the garlic, but cucumbers leave the field first. And now you have the flavor of the cucumber in the other vegetables. The fennel now has the taste of the cucumber. And same with the garlic. So now these have become subject of Beur. And basically, this has now gotten the characteristic of the cucumber. And because it now has the taste of the cucumber, has the characteristic of the cucumber, you now have to put it out for Beur. So because all of the flavors from one vegetable goes into the other ones, as soon as the earliest one gets put out for Beur, all of them get put out for Beur. That's the argument of Rabbi Lazar. Now here's a second view. Rabbi Yeshua says we can eat the vegetables in the barrel even on account of the last to disappear. So basically what he's saying is that as long as any of the 3 species is still found in the field, all the vegetables in the barrel are permitted and are not going to be subject to Beur. So what he's saying that, according to Rabbi Yeshua, even if 2 of the 3 species left the field, the entire mixture can be eaten because on account of the one that remains in existence. The last one to remain in existence is holding the other ones. And the mixture is not going to be prohibited until all 3 are going to leave the field. Now you have the third view in the Mishnah. Rabban Gamliel says with regards to any vegetable in the barrel whose species disappears from the field, and the Mishnah says its species must be removed from the barrel. It is subject to Beur. But any vegetable in the barrel that the species does not disappear from the field is not going to be subject to Beur. So each of the species of the barrel is going to be treated by itself, and we're only going to remove the vegetable that the supply in the field has been exhausted and is left. What is the deeper point of Rabban Gamliel? This is talking about, does taste count like substance? And according to Rabban Gamliel, he's holding that taste does not count as a substance. So very nice, Mr. Adam, that your cucumber went into your shumir and your garlic and your fennel, but we're not counting the flavor because it's just like an essence. It's just a flavor, and that does not have substance. The only substance that you have in your pickle jar is going to be the material, and that is going to be the cucumber. So when the cucumber leaves the field, you take out the cucumber and you leave the other two vegetables there. Much different from Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer, because they're holding that in some way the flavor does count as a substance. And in the case of Rabbi Yeshua is saying that in the case of the last vegetable to leave the field, the flavor of that last vegetable is going into the first vegetable and is somehow making it so that it has this substance of the last vegetable, has this quality of the last vegetable, and that's not subject to Beur yet. In the case of Rabbi Eliezer, he's saying that the first one that leaves goes and changes even the last one, so all three have to leave. And Rabban Gamliel is saying, no, substance really is not anything. And so it's only when the vegetable itself is finished from the field, you take it out and you ignore the flavors that go into the other vegetables in this pickle. And then we have a fourth and final view, and it's none other than Shimon Bar Yochai, and this view says like this. Rabbi Shimon says, all vegetables are as one with regard to Beur, and as long as any vegetables of any type remain in the fields, all species of stored vegetables may be eaten, even those which have themselves disappeared from the field. Now, I want to look at the Rosh to explain this. His understanding of this comes up in Shemitah 7:3, and it comes up before, and basically Rabbi Shimon is holding that the sages did not give different Beur times to each individual type of vegetable. Okay, he's saying that they viewed all the vegetables as just vegetables, and it's really treated like a single species. So it doesn't matter whether you have cucumbers in there, or you have garlic in there, or you have fennel in there, and basically it's a single species. So the Beur deadline for all vegetables is going to be when the longest lasting vegetable is no longer available for the animals in the field. And the Rosh is going to be saying, because no vegetable has its own specific time for Beur, according to Rabbi Shimon, the three species of vegetables in the barrel can be eaten after all have disappeared from the field, as long as any of the other vegetables remain available. Now, that's a big Hiddush, and Rabbi Shimon is going to give another law. He's actually going to continue. And he says, therefore, we can eat all vegetables on account of purslane, which is going to be a vegetable that, which is the vegetable that stays in the field the longest. And it continues and says, until such time as the hidden purslane disappears from the valley of Bet Netofa, and that's the place of dripping. And this, by the way, is going to be an even bigger Hiddush. So Bet Netofa is going to be a secluded, damp area. That's why it's called the place of dripping. Okay? And basically, this moisture is going to hold that the purslane is going to grow even though it left other fields. In other words, this gets back to Rabbi Shimon's point that we covered earlier, that you look at the finest quality of a species. For instance, you don't just look at dates, you look at the best dates in Eretz Yisrael, and you go by that region, not your particular region. You look at the best area for olives, and you don't look at your particular region, you look at the best area for growing olives in Eretz Yisrael, and that's how you set up Beur. Now over here, this is for a vegetable, and those are not for vegetables. So over here, he's saying, what is the place that is the best quality for purslane? Purslane, he's saying, is the last one to leave the field. This is going to be the best quality one, so it's going to be even later to leave the field. That's going to be the argument of Rabbi Shimon. And Rabbi Shimon is holding that the Beur deadline of all the vegetables is going to be determined by the vegetable found latest in the field. And now Rabbi Shimon is saying what that is. And it's going to be an even later date by adding in this chiddush of bet netofa. And basically he's saying that as long as purslane stays in this valley of bet netofa, you can consume all your stored vegetables and pickles. And the Beur deadline is delayed until this last plant in this last place disappears. Big chiddush. So let's get into the Gemara. And the Gemara is going to ask a big question. It wants to get through the order of this. And we know that Rabbi Eliezer is going to have this opinion that different types of vegetables get pickled together and they become subject to Beur as soon as one of them disappears from the field. And basically he's saying that flavor has this essence to it. It has a quality that makes it like a substance. And because of that the quality of this first thing that leaves goes into the last things. Now you've effectively changed the last things in this pickle jar, and it has this quality and this essence of the first thing to leave. Now that last thing, according to Rabbi Eliezer, is subject to Beur. And so the Gemara is going to explain the reasoning behind this view. And the Gemara asks, what is Rabbi Eliezer's reasoning? And basically, it's going to be as follows. When a vegetable is pickled together, they're going to impart the flavor to one another. The Gemara says, thus, the vegetable that is first to disappear from the field infuses the flavor into the last. And basically what he's saying is that the flavor, like the vegetable itself, is going to be subject to Beur because it is a substance. It is something more than just an essence. It is a substance, and it changes the quality. And therefore, once the Beur deadline comes for this first vegetable in the pickle jar, all the vegetables containing this flavor are going to be subject to Beur as well. And I understand that some of these other things in the pickle jar didn't have Beur come about yet. The problem, according to Rabbi Eliezer, he's saying, no. This last vegetable that you have absorbed the flavor and the essence of this first one that already left the field. And this absorbed flavor now causes it to be subject to Beur. And therefore, we can eat this mixture of vegetables only until the earliest Beur deadline of the three. Once it comes, all the vegetables in this jar or barrel become subject to Beur. Now, we want to understand what is the rationale of this second opinion. And the Gemara asks, what is Rabbi Yeshua's reasoning? And basically it's like this. He's saying that, says this Gemara, the last to disappear infuses its flavor into the first. And what is this saying? According to the Mara Fulda, Rabbi Yeshua is recognizing the fact that each vegetable has absorbed some flavor from the others into the mixture. And he's holding that this fact can be utilized for leniency. And he's saying that as long as even a small part of a vegetable or some of this absorbed flavor has not yet reached the Beur deadline, then even those parts that have disappeared from the field may be continuing, you can continue to eat it. Effectively, what he's saying is, since the species that has disappeared from the field is going to have the flavor of the other ones that are still available, they're going to be treated like the other ones, and they're not going to be subject to Beur because they're going to have the taste and the quality of the other ones that are no longer subject to Beur. In other words, this last vegetable, let's say it's fennel, now is infused into this cucumber. And really, yeah, fine, the cucumber is the first one to leave the season. That's fine. But you can't just throw the cucumber out. You're not allowed to waste food. According to Rabbi Yeshua, he's saying, look, that fennel flavor is in the cucumber. It has the quality of fennel. And that is not subject to Beur yet. You can't just throw it out. Well, the Gemara wants to ask about Rabbi Yeshua's reasoning on this because this is a leniency. And the Gemara says, but this ruling of Rabbi Yeshua is difficult to understand. Does not the first also infuse flavor into the last? In other words, it should look more like Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, where all the vegetables should be subject to Beur. He's saying the same thing Rabbi Eliezer is saying, but in opposite. He's saying that the last one is going to impart this quality of not being subject to Beur into the first one. And the Gemara is asking a question, why shouldn't it be like Rabbi Eliezer, where the first one to leave imparts the flavor onto the last one, therefore the last one is going to be subject to Beur? In other words, yeah, okay, fine. Even though you have a vegetable that disappears first from the field, and that's going to absorb flavor from the longest lasting one, the opposite case is also going to be true, where you're going to have the last one having the flavor in the beginning as well. So what's going on? The Mishnah stated, Rabban Gamliel said, any vegetable in the barrel whose species disappears from the field, its species must be removed from the barrel, and it is subject to Beur. And that, by the way, is going to be something that is going to be where they're just not recognizing. Rabban Gamliel is just not recognizing the flavor as a substance that is going to change the character of the other vegetables for Beur. And he's saying the first one to leave, you take it out. Doesn't matter that your cucumber flavored your garlic. Doesn't matter that the flavor of the cucumber is in the fennel. It doesn't count. Only that material there counts, and you take it out. And then the second one to leave, you take out the second one, and you leave the third one. And then when the third one leaves, you take that one out. And that's going to be the order. In other words, substance has no, the flavor has no substance and doesn't influence Beur. So the Gemara is going to issue a ruling, and it's going to say that they taught in the Brisa, the Halacha follows the words of Rabban Gamliel. And there's a parallel about this in the Tosafot and Sachim, and we know that's in page 52a. And basically what the Tosafot is saying is he's saying that the Gemara does not address the reasoning behind Rabban Gamliel's view, and the Rishonim are explaining that according to Rabban Gamliel, the absorbed flavor does not change the obligation of Beur. And to the contrary, he's saying because flavor lacks substance, it is regarded as already having been removed from the world and already went Beur. And because flavor does not require Beur, the exchange of flavor between the vegetables in the barrel is not going to change it where one is going to get delayed because it has this substance in it. And so there's another way to look at Rabban Gamliel's opinion about this. And the Sfas Emes is saying about this as follows. Is saying that so when you look in the Mishnah in 7.2, Rabban Gamliel's ruling, which rules that non-Sheviis produce absorbs flavor from Sheviis produce, it too becomes subject to Sheviis law. And presumably, this includes the law of Beur, which in that case, the Mishnah contradicts the ruling of Rabban Gamliel. By the way, my own note is that, again, you're supposed to look at this and that. You're supposed to look at the Mishnah over there in 7.2 and this Mishnah over here in 9.4, and you're supposed to reconcile them, because over there, it's interesting. Rabban Gamliel over there in 7.2 in Sheviis, he's ruling that you have non-Sheviis produce. It gets the flavors from the Sheviis produce, and now it becomes subject to Sheviis law. But over here in this pickle jar, why isn't it the same thing? Why isn't it that the other vegetables aren't going to change the time for Beur? And that's a big hiddush. And part of it, again, is trying to understand the differences between these Mishnahs. And the Mishnahs are always true. It's just holding different aspects of the law. What's going to be the difference? And, this is a little bit different because this is talking about the law of Beur. And, the note continues about this, that, where the Mishnah contradicts the ruling of Rabban Gamliel, and this Gemara now is going to claim that this over here is going to be authoritative. And so the Shas Resource explains that some explain that when the earlier Mishnah assigns Sheviis law to non-Sheviis produce that absorb the Sheviis flavor, it refers only to the Sheviis prohibition against wasting it and commerce, and not to the law of Beur, which indeed does not apply to absorbed flavor. So the Chazan Ish has a little bit different take, and he's going to say that the Mishnah also is going to refer to Beur over there in 7.2, but the ruling is going to apply only where the Sheviis produce imparts flavor to non-Sheviis produce, but where the different species of Sheviis produce imparts flavor to another Sheviis produce, as in the case of Rabban Gamliel, then basically the absorbed Sheviis flavor is going to require Beur only if the source had already become subject to Beur before imparting the flavor to the other items. So in the case of the Mishnah over there, according to the Chazan Ish, and the Mishnah over here, and by the way, this is saying that this is authoritative, right? This sugya says that the opinion of Rabban Gamliel, that's going to be the halacha. So how do we figure that out? Chazan Ish is saying, look, over there, you're dealing with a pickle jar where you have non-Sheviis produce and you have Sheviis produce, and now the flavor goes into this and that, and now this other non-Sheviis produce now has the quality of Sheviis. And which qualities are that? Well, you're not going to be allowed to waste it, according to the Shas Resource, and you're going to be able to do commerce with it, but it's not going to be subject to the laws of Beur. But actually, what the Chazan Ish is saying, but if you have a case where all of the produce is going to be in the pickle jar and it's all going to be Sheviis produce, then you just take it out one at a time, and you're not worried about where Sheviis produce imparts flavor to one another, because all of the produce is going to be subject to Beur. And alternatively, says the Chazan Ish in Sheviis 11.3, he's saying that the absorbed Sheviis flavor requires Beur only if its source had already become subject to Beur before imparting flavor to the other items. In other words, what this is saying is that over here, these items were already subject to Beur, because in this pickle jar, they were all subject to Beur. They were all seventh-year produce. Now, over in the other case, in 7.2, according to the Chazan Ish, he's effectively saying that, no, it didn't get Beur because it wasn't subject to Beur yet. And it has Sheviis sanctity, but it doesn't get the quality of Beur because it wasn't subject to Beur. And that's how you can reconcile the two. Now, we want to go on to the next part of the Gemara, which is going to talk about the practical requirements of Beur. And Hizkiah says in this Gemara, once a person begins with removing the stored produce, it is as if it has all been removed, and therefore at that point he can reacquire the produce because he performed Beur. This, by the way, is going to get into this debate about, well, Beur came, now what? You have to leave it out as hefker. Question is, some hold that you have to leave it out to be destroyed. Some say that you can leave it out, and leaving it out, that is going to be the action, and then you can reacquire it because it is hefker. And I want to point out something from Rabbi Kanievsky about this. And he's saying that the novelty of Hizkiah's ruling is that the fulfillment of the Beur obligation does not require a person to physically remove all his Sheviis produce from storage. Rather, all that is required for a person to declare that the produce is ownerless and remove a portion of it from the house. And with this, one fulfills the requirement of Beur, which makes it possible for the owner to once again acquire the produce for himself. But by the way, according to Hizkiah's opinion and all, if somebody came very quickly and said, oh, I take it, it's his, it's hefker. So the Gemara now is going to look into Hizkiah's ruling further. And an incident came before Rabbi Yasa regarding one who reacquired Sheviis produce after removing only a part of it from the house. Again, the novelty here is that he's only removing part of it from the house. He's not removing all of it from the house. You would have thought, okay, you got to take all your pickles out and put it all out into the area for everybody to be able to collect it out of the house. And Hizkiah's novelty is saying, no, they're taking part of it out. Part of it still remains there, and then you're reacquiring it. So the Gemara continues, and Rabbi Yasa ruled in accordance with Rabbi Hizkiah, and Rabbi Yasa explained the ruling. He's saying, I ruled like this not because I myself accept this ruling, but on account of that which we saw the great rabbis following his view in actual practice. So Rabbi Yasa is saying that he saw in a tradition great rabbis were actually following Hizkiah's ruling, and he himself doesn't even agree with that ruling, but he ruled that way because he saw, as part of the tradition, other great rabbis doing it. Very humble. The Gemara now is going to suggest another means by which one can easily regain ownership of his Sheviis produce after Beur. Again, there's also another opinion out there that once you leave it out, you have to leave it to be destroyed. It's hefker, and you can't reacquire it. You actually have to leave it out to be destroyed for the animals to come and eat it. This is going to be the other opinion. And by the way, not only is it going to be the other opinion, but it's even going to be more lenient, where Hizkiah is saying you can leave out part of it. Now, I want to point out something about this. This might be occurring in a time when Sheviis is only d'Rabbanan. And so the deeper idea about Hizkiah's point might be that this is at a time where Sheviis and Beur is a d'Rabbanan thing. And the other opinion, where you have to leave it out for the animals to eat it, might be when the Sheviis laws and Beur is going to be d'oraita. And that is going to be a possibility for why Hizkiah's position is going to be so lenient. So the Gemara is going to suggest another means by which someone can easily get ownership of his Sheviis produce after the Beur. And the Gemara says that there was an incident with Rabbi Yitzhak bar Redifa, in which he was asked how can he get ownership of the Sheviis produce while still fulfilling the Beur requirement. And the Gemara says that he went and he posed the question to Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah said to him, what is this? There are lions before you. These are going to be great sages. And you pose the question that to foxes like me? And upon hearing this, Rabbi Yitzhak bar Redifa went and posed the question to Rabbi Yeshaya. And Rabbi Yeshaya said to him, look for 3 who are your friends and declare the Sheviis produce ownerless before them. And by declaring it ownerless, you fulfill your Beur obligation, whereupon you may immediately reacquire the produce. So he's basically saying, look, you went and found 3 friends. Why 3 friends? Because it's like a bet din. And you've effectively declared it ownerless in a presence of 3 people like a bet din. And they're friends. And fine, the witnesses, Rabbi Yeshaya is saying, use the witnesses as friends so that they're not going to be tempted to acquire the produce when you make it hefker. And so you're still going to be able to acquire this ownerless produce for yourself. That's the convenient advice by Rabbi Yeshaya. And the Gemara now is going to offer another strategy by how you can get your Beur items back and also leave it out and reacquire it. And the Gemara says that the Cappadocians of Sippori asked Rabbi Imi, since we, as strangers in the lands, do not have people who are our friends, nor any who inquire about our well-being, what do we do in order to fulfill the Beur obligation while retaining the ability to reacquire the produce? In other words, you had some Cappadocians. Cappadocians are probably going to be people who are from Turkey area, and they were living in Sippori, which is going to be an area in the north in Eretz Yisrael, and they were strangers, and they didn't have anybody to do this kind of arrangement with, where they could pick up, their friends and do it like this. So how do they do it? And the Gemara continues and says that he said to them, when you see that the street is clear of passerbys, you should take out the produce to the street and make it ownerless, and then you should reacquire it immediately, and in this way you avoid the danger of someone else acquiring it during the time where it is ownerless. Now, the Gemara is going to relate the Beur practices of several sages, and upon arrival of the Beur deadline, Rabbi Chagai would distribute flagons upon flagons of wine to everyone, and Rabbi Eliezer too would distribute flagons upon flagons of wine. So what is this? Here's what Rabbi Kanievsky says about this practice, that they would do as recommended in the Mishnah and what's coming up, and upon the arrival of Beur, they would distribute portions of wine and other produce to acquaintances who are permitted to partake of the gifts even after the Beur deadline. In other words, these great sages were not trying to come back and take it for themselves. And simply what they would do is they would distribute the wine among others. And why would that be? Well, they have this other opinion that when you're leaving it as hefker, and it has this quality of Beur, you have to take it out to be destroyed. So effectively what they're doing is they're effectively leaving it out to everybody. And this wine is effectively getting destroyed because other people are coming, acquiring it, and drinking it. And they themselves aren't doing it. They're holding the opinion that the Beur has to be destroyed. And so from their perspective, it is being destroyed. And the other people are getting the benefit of it. Now, the Gemara is going to talk about an incident related to the acquisition of produce after the arrival of Beur. And Rabbi Hiskiah went to visit Rabbi Yirmiyah, who had stored Sheviis produce in Rabbi Hiskiah's house. Rabbi Hiskiah said to Rabbi Yirmiyah, I have acquired your store of Sheviis produce with the arrival of the Beur deadline. Why? Because the Torah basically is turning it into being ownerless. And Rabbi Hiskiah is basically arguing that the arrival of the Beur deadline effectively is going to make privately owned Sheviis permitted to anyone who goes and helps himself to it, even if the owner doesn't even put it out for hefker. In other words, that you don't even own it anymore. The time for Beur came, and even if you didn't take the activity of leaving it out, the other person could still acquire it because it is Beur. And by definition of being Beur, even though you didn't physically take it out, it can be acquired by anybody. That is going to be the deeper point here. And Rabbi Yirmiyah doesn't like that. He tries to prevent Rabbi Hiskiah from acquiring that produce this way. And upon hearing this claim, Rabbi Yirmiyah said to Rabbi Hiskiah, "Bind up these coins for me and keep them with you to guard them." Rabbi Hiskiah accepted the coins for him. And Rabbi Yirmiyah then said to him, "Behold, the place of the produce is leased to me in exchange for these coins." So what's going on here? And Marafulda is saying about this like this. Okay, this is going to be, the idea is going to be a kinyan chatzir. It's an acquisition of a courtyard. And basically what he did, very clever, very, very, very sharp, very smart, he's using this mechanism where movables that get located in someone's property can be acquired by the property on the owner's behalf. So Rabbi Yirmiyah is basically saying that since the property containing the ownerless produce was now his own because he leased it to him, he could reacquire the produce on its behalf because, again, it's the kinyan chatzir. Basically, Rabbi Yirmiyah is arguing that by leasing the property containing the ownerless produce, he was able to acquire it through this legal mechanism through the courtyard. So Hiskiah was powerless to come and acquire the produce for himself. Basically what happened is Rabbi Yirmiyah goes and effectively gives him the coins, and he accepts the coins. And then he says to them, "Behold, the place of the produce is leased to me in exchange for the coins." He turned it into a lease, and he got the courtyard. And because by getting the courtyard, he prevented the other person from being able to acquire it. But Rabbi Hiskiah rejects this argument. He says to Rabbi Yirmiyah, "You did not actually declare the produce ownerless, that you now acquire it." So basically what's happening here is Rabbi Hiskiah, says the Marafulda, is pointing out that although others are permitted to help themselves to privately own Sheviis, from the time of Beur, the owner in this case, which could be Rabbi Yirmiyah, is not allowed to do so until he fulfills the requirement of Beur by formally relinquishing ownership of the produce. And since Rabbi Yirmiyah has not yet fulfilled this requirement, he cannot take possession of the produce. So in other words, he's saying that he did not actually get the kinyan on it. I want to point out an opinion of the Vilna Goan's view to help explain this. The Vilna Goan is saying that Rabbi Hiskiah was not trying to gain possession of Rabbi Yirmiyah's produce. In fact, the way the Vilna Goan's reading it, he's saying that the produce was not located even on Rabbi Hiskiah's property at all. Rather, Yirmiyah was concerned about the disposition of his Sheviis produce after Beur, and he assumed that he himself could not reacquire the produce after Beur, and therefore he wished to ensure that it would fall into Rabbi Hiskiah's hands. And to this end, he handed the money to Rabbi Hiskiah with the instructions to return the money as rent for the location in which Rabbi Yirmiyah's produce was stored. And so that when Rabbi Yirmiyah declared the produce hefker, it would immediately become the property of Rabbi Hiskiah through the legal mechanism of the kinyan chatzir. And according to the Vilna Goan, Rabbi Hiskiah replied, "Not so, there's no need for this. And upon relinquishing the ownership of the produce, you may reacquire it." That's to say that Rabbi Hiskiah is informing Rabbi Yirmiyah that he himself could, in fact, reacquire the produce after Beur, and therefore there was no need to arrange this kind of acquisition by Rabbi Hiskiah. So there's a question, is a kinyan of the courtyard going to be able to acquire this? And it looks like that could have been a valid idea because the property was there. He created a lease, handed him the money, and basically was creating this rent to, as a location. And then basically what would happen is that as soon as he this produce becomes subject to Biur and Hefker, the kinyan, the leased property, goes and acquires it. That was the idea. So tomorrow we're going to be getting into different types of produce and the Beur times when other kinds of produce comes in. Have a great day.